The night I realized my sister had been lying to me, I was sitting on my kitchen floor in pajama pants with tiny lemons on them, eating cold leftover mac and cheese straight out of the pot. Not exactly the dramatic setting you'd expect for a life-changing revelation, right? But that's how it happened. Ordinary, quiet, the dishwasher humming. My son Eli asleep upstairs with one sock on and one sock mysteriously missing, like always. And before I take you back to that night, just, if you're here, if you like stories that unfold slowly and honestly, go ahead and subscribe to her Untold Revenge. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It always amazes me how these stories travel farther than we ever could. Okay, let me start at the beginning. My name is Tessa Whitaker. I'm 39. I teach kindergarten. I have one son, Eli, who thinks cereal is a food group, and that dragons are probably real in some states. And last year, my mother Margaret was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. You don't really brace yourself for that kind of sentence. You hear it in other families. You send casseroles. You say, oh gosh, that's heartbreaking. But when the neurologist says it about your mother, the woman who braided your hair too tight and ironed your school uniforms and never once forgot your birthday, it feels like someone quietly tipped your world on its side. It was Beth who took charge immediately, my older sister. 2 years ahead of me in everything grades, boys, moving out, getting married. She had always been the decisive one. I was the one who overthought things, the peacemaker, the one who said, "Are we sure?" while Beth was already halfway out the door doing it. At the appointment, while I was still trying to understand the phrase cognitive decline, Beth was asking about power of attorney, long-term planning, asset protection. She had a little leather notebook, and she was writing things down like we were planning a vacation. "I'll handle the logistics," she said in the parking lot. "Tess, you've got Eli. You work full-time. I'm only 20 minutes from Mom. It just makes sense." And I nodded. Of course I nodded, because it did make sense. And because part of me was relieved. That's the part I still wrestle with, the relief. A week later, I installed a small camera in Mom's kitchen. Not to spy. Not to catch anyone, just to check in. I told myself it was practical. Alzheimer's can make people forget meals, forget stoves, forget pills. The camera faced the kitchen table and the medication cabinet. I told Mom about it. She laughed and said, "Well, if I start dancing on the countertops, at least you'll have proof." It felt harmless. For months, it was harmless. I'd check on Sunday afternoons while Eli watched cartoons. I'd see Mom making tea, or listening to the radio, or staring out the window at the bird feeder like she was waiting for something only she could see. Sometimes Beth would be there, moving efficiently through the kitchen, organizing pill bottles, wiping counters. I felt grateful, truly. Then little things started to bother me. Mom would say she felt foggy on certain days. She'd complain that her medication made her sleepy. "It's probably just the disease progressing," Beth would say gently. The doctor warned us, and I accepted that. Because what did I know? I teach 5-year-olds how to spell cat. I'm not a neurologist, but that night on the kitchen floor, with the cold mac and cheese and the dishwasher humming, something wouldn't let me sleep. I don't know what triggered it. Maybe it was the way Mom had looked at me earlier that day and said, "Did I already take my pills, or did Beth take them for me?" In this small, uncertain voice, I opened my laptop. I scrolled back further than I usually did. I don't know why. I just did. And that's when I saw something that made my stomach drop so fast, I actually thought I might throw up. It was a Thursday in March, 11:42 p.m. Mom had gone to bed. The kitchen was dim, just the little light over the sink on. Beth was there alone. She opened the medication cabinet, took out Mom's Alzheimer's prescription, poured pills into her hand, and then she hesitated. She reached into her purse. She took out a different bottle. I leaned closer to the screen like that would somehow change what I was seeing. She tipped 3 small white tablets into her palm, swapped them, put the original pills into a tiny plastic bag, slid it back into her purse. I replayed it, over and over. There's a moment in life where your brain refuses to cooperate, where it says, "No, that can't be right. You're misunderstanding. Maybe the lighting is weird. Maybe she's, I don't know, reorganizing?" But she wasn't. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called Hannah Ortega, my best friend since college. She's a pharmacist. I described the pills as best as I could. She went quiet in a way I've learned to fear. "Tess," she said slowly, "those sound like over-the-counter sleep aids, diphenhydramine. They're not dangerous in small doses, but in elderly patients with dementia, they can worsen confusion. They can accelerate cognitive decline. Accelerate. The word hit me like a slap. I felt cold all over. So if someone was, hypothetically, swapping those for her actual Alzheimer's medication." Another pause. "That's not hypothetical, is it?" "No, that's serious, Tessa. That's not a mistake." I hung up and just stood there in my kitchen while Eli chattered about a field trip permission slip. I remember staring at the refrigerator magnets like they were going to rearrange themselves into answers. I started watching more footage. Not obsessively at first, just enough to confirm I hadn't imagined it. It wasn't just one night, it was a pattern. On certain evenings, Beth would refill the weekly pill organizer, and on weekends when I wasn't around, those compartments had the wrong pills. And then there were the late-night visits. Beth had a key that wasn't strange. What was strange was the timestamps. 1:17 a.m., 2:03 a.m., 1:54 a.m. She'd go straight to the filing cabinet Mom kept by the back door, the one with old tax returns and insurance documents and Dad's handwritten will. One night, she took out an envelope and counted cash. Cash I didn't know existed. I felt like I was peeling wallpaper off my own childhood home and discovering rot underneath. I checked Mom's online banking. Beth had insisted on helping set it up for convenience. I still had the password from a notarized letter Mom had written years ago. There were checks I didn't recognize, large ones, thousands at a time. My hands were shaking so badly I had to steady them on the counter. I didn't confront Beth immediately. I know some of you listening might think, why not? I've asked myself that too. But when it's your sister, the girl who held your hand on the first day of school, who shared clothes and secrets and whispered crushes, your brain searches desperately for another explanation. Maybe she was moving money to pay for something for Mom. Maybe she had cleared it and forgotten to tell me. Maybe I was overreacting. Except the numbers didn't lie. And neither did the pills. I called Carla Bishop. She's a forensic accountant Hannah knew. Carla was methodical, calm, the kind of woman who wears navy sweaters and speaks in precise sentences. She went through everything. 2 weeks later, she sat across from me in her office and said, "Conservatively, I can trace $182,000 that has been diverted." Diverted. That's such a clean word for something so ugly. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "And the medication?" she asked. I showed her the clips. Her jaw tightened. "You need to speak to law enforcement." The word law enforcement made my stomach twist. I wasn't built for courtrooms and charges and police reports. I was built for glitter glue and snack schedules. But this wasn't about me. It was about Mom. I spoke to Detective Mendez, Financial Crimes Unit. She had this steady, grounded energy that made you feel like you could hand her something fragile and she wouldn't drop it. "What do you want to happen?" she asked me. "I want my mother safe," I said, "and I want it to stop." That's when everything started moving. APS got involved. Apparently, Beth had preemptively filed a report claiming I was interfering with Mom's care. That hurt in a way I can't fully explain. Not just because it was manipulative, but because it meant she knew what she was doing was wrong. She was preparing defenses. The day of the confrontation, my heart felt like it was trying to escape my ribcage. We told Beth we were having a family meeting. Daniel flew in from Oregon. Roy, Mom's attorney, was there. Men's waited in the study. When Beth walked in, cheerful and unsuspecting, carrying a bouquet of lilies, I almost faltered. Because for a split second, I saw my sister. Not a suspect, not an abuser, just my sister. Then I pressed play. The footage filled the TV screen, the pill swap, the late-night cabinet visits, the bank transfers. Beth's face drained of color. She tried to speak. The words tangled. Mom was sitting in Dad's old armchair. She watched everything in silence. And then she said, in this clear, steady voice I hadn't heard in months, "Bethany, why?" It was that one word why that shattered something in the room. Beth cried. Real crying. Not the polished, composed kind. She talked about debt, about Sophie's rehab bills, about desperation, about thinking she'd fix it later. But you don't fix 11 months of drug tampering and financial exploitation. Detective Mendez stepped forward. She read the charges calmly. When they put the cuffs on Beth gently, in front, like Mendez had promised, I felt like I was watching a movie about someone else's family. As they let her out, she looked at me and said, "You did this." And I said very quietly, "No, you did." After that, everything moved both fast and slow at the same time. There were court dates, plea deals, restitution orders, 5 years state, 7 probation, no contact. Mom moved into a small memory care farmhouse 40 minutes from me. Marlene, the in-home aide who had quietly noticed the pill inconsistencies before I did, went with her. Bless that woman, truly. Some days Mom knows me. Some days she calls me Beth's name, and the first time it happened I had to go sit in my car and cry where. She couldn't see me. Now I just answer. Eli visits every Saturday. He reads dinosaur books. Mom laughs at the pictures even when she forgets the story. And sometimes, late at night, I still open that camera app. The kitchen is empty now. The clock on the wall stopped months ago. Dust gathers on the counter. The light from the street lamp stretches across the floor in this pale blue stripe. I used to think the camera was there to catch wrongdoing. But it caught something else too. It caught the last ordinary months of my mother's independence. It caught her humming while she made tea. It caught Beth before everything unraveled, resting her chin on Mom's shoulder and smiling like nothing in the world was broken. Both things can be true. Someone can love you and still harm you. That's the part I'm still learning to live with. If you're listening and there's a small voice in your gut telling you something isn't right, please don't ignore it. Ask the hard question. Check the bank statement. Look at the pill bottle. Love does not mean blindness. And if this story stayed with you, if you felt even a flicker of recognition, subscribe to her Untold Revenge. Share this with someone who needs the reminder that protecting the people we love sometimes means standing against the people we love. Tell me in the comments what's the question you wish you'd asked sooner. I'm reading them. I really am. And tonight, like most nights, I'm going to sit on the edge of Eli's bed for a minute before I sleep. I'm going to listen to the house settle. I'm going to let myself feel the quiet. Because sometimes the bravest thing we do isn't dramatic at all. It's just staying. Good night.